Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first meeting of 2025 for the Abington Heights School Board. Would everyone please rise and pledge the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It appears Dr. Schaefer has many tasks tonight, so we'll wait for him to sit down before we do roll call.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. Mr. Abdallah.
Here.
Mr. Azar.
Here.
Ms. Henderson.
Here.
Ms. Hildebrand.
Here.
Ms. Karam.
Here.
Mr. Moran.
Here.
Mr. Robeson.
Here.
Ms. Tierney.
Here.
Mr. Acker.
Here.
Perfect.
May I please have a motion to approve the agenda for the meeting of January 8th?
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Ms. Henderson.
Yes.
Ms. Hildebrand.
Yes.
Ms. Karam.
Yes.
Mr. Moran.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Ms. Tierney.
Yes.
Mr. Acker.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Abdallah.
Yes.
That was intentional.
Okay, can we please have the superintendent's hat? So on to your next role.
Okay. I have a brief presentation today, and it's really along the lines of a FYI. So the first one is not behind me on the board because it's just a couple of dates to remember. But we'll be announcing this and advertising this in the future. As many of you know, the Pennsylvania School Code is old, predates the internet. So we communicated, school boards had to communicate in different ways, and that is codified into law through statute, so sometimes it does not make sense. However, we still go through those processes, and one of them is called an Act 34 hearing, which we're mandated to do for certain construction projects. And the objective behind Act 34 is to make sure that the public is aware of everything that is occurring. It would provide the opportunity for the board to hear feedback from the community, and it's also a time where we set a threshold on construction. That doesn't mean that the cost can't increase. If it did, you would go to another Act 34 hearing. So what that means for our purposes is that on February the 5th, the first board meeting in February, I'll be putting a motion forth to ask the board to approve the advertising for a special meeting. And at that time, we will announce that we'll be having an Act 34 hearing on February the 27th. So this is something that we need to make sure that we have the opportunity as a board to hold space for, because this is a special meeting. This is an Act 34 hearing. There will be specific criteria that we will go through. This will be facilitated by a solicitor, and then we'll have folks here from the construction management company in KCBA, and we will essentially lay out the details that we already have numerous times about this project. So this is not a surprise. This is part of the school code, which you're obligated to do. So I wanted to make sure I announce that in public. So this isn't, we're not trying to do something different. I believe that we've been overly transparent, as we should be throughout this whole process.
And Dr. Schaefer, is there like a particular threshold of amount on construction project, or is it just
No, it's
arbitrary?
what we take is, because it's before a bid. So it's our best estimates through the construction management and our KCBA. So the next informational item that I want to briefly go through as we turn the page on a new year in 2025 is this is really when we start our budget process. And as many of you know, and if you are unaware, oftentimes school boards have to approve our budget before we even know the state allocation. Despite the state having the same, or the Commonwealth having the same deadline as we do, I have yet to see us make it. Sometimes we don't know what our allocation is well into the fall. That's certainly happened many times in my tenure. This year was pretty quick, and we found out in late August. Nevertheless, we have to go through this process, and in the beginning of this process, what I always say in public is the board may take some votes in the very beginning of 2025 regarding the preliminary budget, and they are not voting on a final budget. That final budget vote comes in June. Okay, so I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of that. So today what I want to talk about is our timeline that I'll be putting forth to the board relative to the Act 1 referendum exception timeline, and I'll talk a little bit about this. But as I sat down to put together the preliminary budget with our business manager, Jim Mirabelli, there were a couple key drivers that led to this timeline, which I will discuss in the next slide, the timeline. But I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about some of those key drivers that inform our decisions and our timelines. I often talk about them as headwinds and tailwinds. Every year we seem to have a bunch of headwinds and a bunch of tailwinds. And we do a really good job at managing our budget throughout and coming in on the right side of that. But it takes careful, deliberate, strategic management of your operational budget to do so. And that happens kind of throughout the year. But these are kind of some of the key players and levers that we've seen throughout. But special education enrollment has grown by 32%, increasing from 450 students in 2019 to 593 in 2023. It's certainly higher right now, but what I'm doing is I'm pulling data from completed sources because the data to our state has a lag. So Jim, we just submitted, final reports in late November. And this is a piece of data that's not shocking to me. I think that there's different ways to take a look at data, and they tell a story. And when I take a look at this, it tells me that we are evolving in education. We are evolving as we better understand the myriad of disabilities that are out there that many of our students are faced with. As a result of high-quality research that we see in the United States, we do a very good job there. We're learning more and more about how to diagnose quickly or quicker than we did in the past. We are learning better strategies as educators to attend to the various needs, the depth and complexity that some of these disabilities present within our classrooms and outside of our classrooms. And that's a good thing. So unfortunately, this does have an impact on our budget that way. And over the past 6 years, our special education costs have risen by $2.4 million. So that's a 30% increase. As a result of this, the state provides us with two different subsidies, one for special education, one for regular education. Over that same period of time, our subsidy from the state has gone up 13%. While I am, hopeful and I appreciate that 13% increase, there is some disproportionality that we see there. And that is just one of the challenges that we face. And this is something that I advocate for and talk to our local legislators about how we provide or calculate special education subsidy. And you've heard us talk about this as a board, and certainly me as a superintendent, about how this impacts us with cyber. And for the board and anybody out there listening, this makes a big difference for schools like Abington Heights that have to produce a lion's share of the revenue for education. Almost 70 cents out of every dollar comes from local sources to educate our children. 29 cents from state funding, and as you can see, federal funding only makes up 1.4 or a penny of that. So this again is nothing new. We talk about this quite often, that a majority of our funding for education comes from local revenue. In addition, our healthcare costs have increased by $1.67 million over the past 2 years, 15% and 13% respectively. Some years prior to that, we did well, and we didn't have to reimburse ourselves. And I know that sounds odd, but we are self-insured, so we pay ourselves monthly. We pay close to $600,000 a month for healthcare. And in some cases, when we do well, we withhold a payment. But that hasn't been the case over the last 2 years. We've been monitoring this. We had held out hope that perhaps this was an anomaly post-COVID, because we had not ever experienced anything like COVID. But we do know anecdotally and through evidence that many people could not see their doctors and healthcare providers during that time. We obviously had some savings there, and then we kind of regressed back to the mean, and then it exceeded that by probably a standard deviation if you're into statistics. But we're at that point now where I spoke with Jim Mirabelli and said, we now have to allocate more money into the operating budget to the tune of about $800,000, okay? Because we are self-funded, and we need to carry a balance. And if we didn't make that adjustment, within 2 years, we wouldn't have much choice, but we'd have to join some type of consortium. There would be a lot of things that would need to happen. And so I don't want to put the cart before the horse. So that was a key driver. And of course, debt service increases as we talk about construction. As a result of this, we're putting together a preliminary budget that will address this. Now, this is a preliminary budget, so we'd be voting on a preliminary budget, but this is not the final budget. The board has the authority to make any decision when it comes down to numbers when we come to a final budget. But on January the 10th, we are going to advertise in a newspaper to give public notice of our intent to adopt the 25-26 preliminary budget on January the 22nd. Jim will be there, and we'll have the opportunity, have the opportunity to ask questions. We'll present the information. This deadline is 10 days prior to the budget adoption. On January the 22nd, that's actually 2025, I'm sorry about that error, we will put a motion to approve a preliminary budget, which will include a tax increase above the Act 1 index, okay? And then this is where the referendum exception comes in. There's only a few instances, and really only one, that Abington Heights qualifies for to go above the Act 1 index. And that has to do with special education. And so we did qualify based on the data that I told you, okay? So our index is 4.7%. With the exception, it's about 5.2. Jim, I have the exact number. It's 5.2. So that preliminary budget will have that 5.2 number there. On January 23rd, we will publish a notice in the newspaper of our intent to request approval from the Department of Education for a referendum exception. So we have to then ask the Department of Education. So as you can see, nothing is a given here, but you have to make sure to protect yourselves. It's my job to protect you that way, to look over those best interests, and whatever the board decides, the board decides. But I think I would be negligent if I did not look at that. So we'll publish that notice of our intent, and then March 6th is a deadline to seek approval from the Department of Education for this exception, requiring their approval. And when we talk about an application, there is a form that we fill out. This is a very simple, I'm not even going to call it an algorithm. Plus, minus, divide, equals, and you can tell sitting at a desk within 5 minutes if you qualify. So if we did not qualify, I would not be putting this in front of you. So that's that preliminary budget. And then, as you know, the data will come in from January all the way till the end of May, where we'll be making adjustments. And then we'll talk about those adjustments and put it in front of the board in June for a final adoption, and whatever it may be. And it's just like anything else before. You know, I'm putting together a budget that is the maximum, that will be a 5.7, and the board could say 0. But I need to put that in here to account for anything that we may qualify for that may protect us based on that information. And during that whole time, as we look at the information that comes in, we'll reevaluate the numbers. So for instance, I talked about headwinds and tailwinds, and for the last 7 minutes, I've been talking about a headwind. A tailwind for the last 3 years is our EIT has come in strong, the earned income tax. And by all the metrics that I've seen up to today, it's coming in strong again, probably a plus 5.89%, somewhere around 300,000 to the positive. So that's a tremendous tailwind. But a 6 number pales in comparison to a 30% or 27%. And as I talk with Jim about this, and oftentimes I kick numbers around with him, and sometimes it's in frustration. And as we looked at this, and a lot of things too are out of our control, and we advocate for different sources of funding. I told Jim that when I was a little kid, I used to go play wiffle ball every single day in the backyard in the summer. Sometimes we'd have 15 neighbor kids out there playing, and sometimes it was just like 4 of us. So I would be on third base, and I'd say, all right, there's a ghostie on first and a ghostie on second, and you're just trying to keep track of all these ghosties. They're just like these people that you don't see. I said, Jim, we just had to add 800,000 into healthcare. That's like 8 ghosties. And I said, plus 6 from Esser. I've got a Newton Ransom school full of ghosties. And I tell you that not to, hey, let's kind of feel bad, but to understand the challenges that the board has. There's no decision that is easy. Everything, it seems like, is a trade-off, right? And the worst-case scenario is that we get into the business or we have to make sacred trade-offs. And we never want to have to trade off something sacred for another sacred. That's just a matchup that I don't want to see. In contrast to Penn State, Notre Dame, going to any lines. So with that said, and knowing that on January 22nd is when you'll have the detailed presentation, are there any questions relative to the, I can't give you all the budget details, but the process and the context?
Did you say what Act 1 index is? 4.7?
4.7. So the base index, good question, the base index in Pennsylvania is 4%. Then there is, for lack of a better term, a poverty ratio. That's the term that everybody uses. Ours gives us an additional 0.7, so then our index is 4.7. And then we get a 0.5, a 0.5% on the exception. I think it comes out to almost $1 million.
The increase.
Yes.
Almost a million.
I'm gonna, let me work over it with Jim to have the number. Now I'm moving from like percentages to cash and, yeah.
Okay, I know the answer, but I just want to make sure we confirm it for the public. So we may put together a budget we will be putting together a budget that will, in all probability, have a tax increase,
Correct,
perhaps as high as 5.2%.
correct.
But in reality, this board doesn't have to approve that increase until June.
Correct.
So everything we do until June is simply budgeting and so on. The vote in June is what decides. And at that point, if we have a budget that's has a 5.7% increase, but the board says they're uncomfortable with that, they can do that at that point in time.
Correct.
They are not locked in.
Nope, the board could say, we want 0%, we want 4%, we'll vote,
We just can't go higher.
right, we just get into trade-offs.
Yep.
But we'll have some of that data as we get closer. Because, again, I'm giving you healthcare numbers, and Jim and I have been tracking it since July. And it's commensurate with what we saw the year before. But maybe things turn around. I don't know. But we still have plenty of data markers coming in on that.
I think I misspoke. That vote isn't at the end of May, it's the end of June.
Correct. We have to have it, we usually have it in somewhere mid-June in that area.
So if you could go back one page?
Yep.
Because I don't remember exactly what, so you said, healthcare costs increased by 1.67 million over the past 2 years. Is that combined? I know you said it's 13
Yeah,
to 15,
so
but
it's
a total of
close
1.67
to, it's 870 and change each year.
each year.
Yep.
So like when we talked about the budget a year ago, was it roughly 800 lower than
Yep.
that? Like, half of that lower?
Good, great question. So, for the most part, we have budgeted a 3% increase yearly for healthcare, approximately $250,000. And for a good bit of time, that worked out well.
Right.
And then we budgeted 3%, and we went 800, close to 900 over. And then we budgeted 3% again. Same thing happened. And then we stepped up the meetings with our healthcare consultants. We talked about more projections, and we arrived at the conclusion that the most prudent decision to make is to put another million in, which is your 800,000 plus your normal 3% to balance things out.
And a lot of those cost increases are prescription drugs,
Specialty drugs, it's the same cast of characters that, this is not an Abington Heights thing. If you pick up the newspaper, I'm not gonna name some, large healthcare systems, but I've certainly read about many healthcare systems that, and I know many of you know, that are facing the same thing, school districts facing the same things, and we looked at, all sorts of different ways to kind of contain it, and it just, that's,
But that's a very,
constant.
that's a very volatile number compared to like budgeting the cost of paper, right?
Correct.
So like, and that's a huge increase over the last 2 years, right? And like.
Huge.
We're hoping, right,
Yeah.
that it doesn't continue, but like you budgeted 800, like it could get worse.
It
Given how
could get,
volatile it's been
yes.
recent.
Yep, it could. It's,
And so like to put into context from a finance standpoint, like when we all got together a year ago and said, hey, we can raise this much in debt based on the budget, and a lot of things in the budget will move, but like that's a big move. That's a lot of cash flow.
that's if you, and
Relative to
I
where we
shouldn't
thought
be
we were.
doing like, matchbox math here, but 800,000 is a hefty sum of debt service.
Yeah, it's probably
If you
15.
said, hey, we're gonna put this 800 towards debt service, we're talking probably over 10, between 10 and 20 million in debt service. And then you're just saying, well, we're gonna not do that because we have to put it back into our operating.
And that number really also, it relies on the experience. So if we have a couple employees that have catastrophic illnesses, that drives the cost right out of sight. Whereas if that doesn't happen, perhaps we have a, quote, good year. And I think a lot of that has to do with the age of our workforce. The older they are, the more likely we're going to have higher.
Yeah, we, that's why we have our healthcare consultants, because we're not only providing healthcare for our employees. Well, look, we provide healthcare for what I think it breaks down to be, call it 33 to 35% of our healthcare is our employees. The remainder are the dependents. And then the way our contract reads, we do carry past, right? So these are opportunities for growth and improvement as we work with our partners in the district, our unions, as we think about how we might provide high-quality health care in a more cost-efficient manner. This just happens to be a really challenging battle. And look, I'm a neophyte with healthcare, but I've tried to read about it, and I just get more confused as I read about it. But I do know that we work with many different people with healthcare, enough to confuse everybody, but.
But to Mr. Azar's point, I mean, 14%, it could be way worse. Because just the cost of materials and labor over the last 2 years was well over 20. So, not that it translates one-to-one, but it could be higher.
It could be higher, sure.
And we've had years where we've had over a 14% increase in healthcare. Because we're self-insured, we have a balance that we keep. And there's always been a percentage that we've always kept towards that. What, do you have any understanding of?
Yeah, so
What is
there-
what we have in that account?
I do. To my knowledge, and I think we've addressed this before too, there is no industry standard for what you should have in a balance. With that said, 3 years ago, our balance was enough to pay for a year's worth of claims, which some may consider to be healthy. But one thing I learned in statistics is that outliers are volatile. and a couple of these outlier years, and all of a sudden instead of 12 months, we're now closer to 6 months. So Jim and I ran the numbers and said, if I did nothing, if I advised the board to hold at 3% and did nothing, at the end of 25, 26, we would be in a spot where we may not be able to be self-insured because we would be at an area where I could not advise the board to continue. Because another month could wipe you out.
You can't take that risk.
You can't take that risk, is right.
Yeah, there's risks.
So by making this adjustment up, I'm pushing it out. You know, I'm saying, okay, this is a significant, you know, we've been close to 900 at a loss, but we had before, in healthy times, $6.5 million fund. But when you're losing 2 million, then, you know, you're in a spot where you gotta make that adjustment.
Actually have those numbers. So you said we were at 6
Yeah.
something. So it's currently standing at 4.5, and the loss this last year was 1.5. Just over the 12 months. The loss was 1.5?
Now, well, it's,
Well, again, these are my notes
Yeah.
from Jim's fiscal presentation, but my notes say that
Yeah.
we are currently at 4.5, and our loss was 1.5, and he made a point to say we will need to replenish that fund.
now what the numbers that I'm giving you, I don't wanna get into the weeds on it, but we do get some coupons back for prescription. We have stop-loss insurance. Stop-loss insurance does not always kick in. And so when we account, even for that, we've got losses, so.
And I think as your balance goes down, your stop-loss insurance goes up, because from their standpoint, they have a higher risk.
Even in times where we did well, the stop-loss insurance went up. Never seen it go down, so, and it gets harder and harder to get. There isn't that competitive a market, so it's.
You pay what the market.
Yeah, exactly, it's the opposite of a
pay-
competitive
You pay
market.
what the market bears.
But,
Yeah, this is one of those departments that we can't, we have to keep that.
Yep,
Absolutely.
yep. So,
It's a situation where you have to be conservative.
the good news is that I'm bringing this up in January on purpose. You know, we've got, 6 more months left. There's a whole lot of information that has to come in. This is why Jim, if you put him in front of you, would say, well, yeah, I always have a difficult time putting together a preliminary budget. I mean, Governor Shapiro hasn't even put out his preliminary budget. And then, 2 minutes after he puts that out, we hear from a different segment saying, that's a joke. It should be, the opposite of that. And then we will have to talk to other professionals and figure out, oh, well, where should we put our marker in the preliminary? Are we gonna get an increase? Are you gonna take money away? So, but that's, most of you are used to it. This is how it goes, and I just want to be fully transparent about, this wasn't an arbitrary type of decision. It was informed by some information that I wanted to put in you early, and then we'll keep on tracking it.
Well, I appreciate the information, especially with the deadlines and the time frame, because if we are going to go
Yeah.
above the index, we have to go through the guidelines and the deadlines
Correct.
to be able to qualify for that, so I appreciate the timeline.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Our next item is time for public comment. If there's there's someone in the public that would like to address the board, please come forward. We'd like to ask you to identify yourself and where you live, and keep your comments to roughly 3 minutes or so. So is there anyone that would like to speak to the board? Okay. Let's move then to the action and discussion items. Dr. Schaefer? turn it over.
Okay. Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board consider a motion to approve the personnel report as presented.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Henderson?
Yes.
Ms. Hillebrand?
Yes.
Ms. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Ms. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And I would like to note that Mrs. Morrison, our new Director of Human Resources, is here, and welcome. We're excited to have you.
And I believe that you're going to be starting January 22nd around? Yep, close enough. All right.
Very good.
Okay. Mr. Acker, I ask that the board consider a motion to approve the 23-24 IDEA use of funds agreement with the NEIU. This is an annual agreement. They're used as a pass-through.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Hillebrand?
Yes.
Ms. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Ms. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Ms. Henderson?
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0. Mr. Acker, asks the board consider a motion to approve the agreement with Valdosta State University for student teaching, field, and clinical experience. I'll just take a moment here because this is somewhat new within the last 2 years, but for probably those in education and most likely other fields that I'm unfamiliar with, it is becoming more and more difficult for teachers to find in-person programs. Certainly, there are advantages to programs that are online, and as we see more online programs occurring, that means that we're going to have more articulation agreements from universities that we typically may not have approved, and this is one of them. So I just want to make sure everybody was aware of that.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Ms. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Ms. Henderson?
Yes.
Ms. Hillebrand?
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0. Mr. Acker, before I read this next motion, I would probably be breaking Robert's rules that I'm totally unfamiliar with at this stage, with asking Mr. Azar to provide a little bit of an update from the Facilities Committee relative to a construction management contract that we have.
I think the
Want me to
committee
do it on
makes
the
the motion,
question?
don't they?
What's that?
I think the committee makes the motion.
Yeah, on the question, I can make my.
Okay, that's
on the
good.
question,
Then we'll do
I'll
it
make
that.
my comment.
All right.
Yeah.
Then in that case, Mr. Acker, I would ask the board to consider a motion to approve a construction management contract with ICS for the addition and renovation of the Abington Heights Middle School.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion?
All right.
Mr. Azar.
Sure. So I'll make a few comments. The Facilities Committee did meet last week, right after New Year's, to discuss the whole process again that we went through in our search for the construction manager. And I'll start with the conclusion. The committee unanimously voted to recommend putting ICS on the agenda tonight for the full board to vote on. So the process that we ran over the last couple of months, led by Dr. Schaefer and his administration, I think was an excellent one. Mr. Mirabelli put out an RFP. We got 5 responses. The firms that responded to the RFP included CHA, Boyle, ICS, SiteLogic, and Quandel. Once the proposals came in, Dr. Schaefer shared them with selected members of his administration team, including Mrs. Snyder, the middle school principal, Mr. Parfrey, our head of facilities, as well as all the facilities committee members. Ms. Hildebrand had to recuse herself. She has a business relationship with one of the bidders. Mr. Abdallah and I were able to attend the finalist interviews in person, where after we did a ranking of the proposals, it was pretty clear that we wanted to bring in 3 finalists, and those included CHA, ICS, and SiteLogic. All 3 firms came in and presented for about an hour. All were excellent. Everybody on the committee, once the interviews were over, agreed that all 3 were qualified. All 3 could definitely perform the work that was required. It was great to have 3 qualified finalists. And after a good amount of deliberation and discussion, we did, Mr. Abdallah and I, and Dr. Schaefer in particular, all agreed that ICS was the #1 choice for a variety of reasons. I was a little bit ignorant to what does a construction manager do, and so for the board, I guess I'll just mention a couple of things. So there were 3, and they all presented very similarly in terms of the process. The 3 main things that the construction manager is going to do for us in this project is first, the pre-construction work. They're going to get together with our design firm, KCBA, and really dig into the drawings that have been done so far and analyze them and make any, based on their experience, suggestions that they think should be considered, as well as potentially cost savings, if they think there's ways for us to save on design processes. And then once that process it'll be somewhat iterative, is complete, the second stage is running the bidding process. So they really manage the entire bidding process, where we go out to hire our 4 prime contractors: the general contractor, electrician, HVAC, and plumbing. And then once that process is done, they have a person who is one of the people that was at the finalist interview, which is the actual on-site manager that sits at the site in a trailer every day from dawn to dusk, basically, throughout the whole construction process. That works very closely with Mrs. Snyder and our administration at the middle school on a daily basis to make sure that the project site is safe, first and foremost, and to make sure that the contractors are building what they're supposed to build. So that whole process from start to finish is basically the simple scope of services. There's a lot of detail in the contract that's on the agenda tonight. So that's it. If anybody has any questions on the process that was run, I'm happy to.
So, Mr. Azar, not so much on the process, but in looking at the contract, there's, I couldn't help but be reminded of our pool project. And here's the good news. They have a daily PM there, which is really good.
Yeah.
That was like my biggest concern.
Yeah.
And I know the pricing is such that there's a little bit in the beginning, a little bit at the end, and then there's a chunk of about $820,000 or $113,000 in the middle. The things that you talked about, is that what the main deliverable is? I mean, I know there's working with the architect and daily PM work, which is all good.
Yep.
But what do we get for, specific to the construction manager, what do we get?
I mean, I think that the bulk, and Dr. Schaefer can jump in too, I think that the bulk of the cost of the construction manager is the fact that they're on site for 2 years. It's really that person that's in the trailer every day running the process. That's the bulk of the fee. I don't know the exact breakdown, but that is actually the bulk of the fee. And then the other processes, which include the pre-construction interactions with KCBA, right? And the bidding process itself, which is relatively quick, but requires a lot of expertise. Those are not as cost-intensive, so to speak,
They're-
not as time-intensive as the actual.
So there's a lot of,
Project.
there are, as Rod said, yes, for 2.5 years, there will be a project manager. But right now, I've already been sitting in meetings with them, so we meet bi-weekly with no less than 8 engineers, project managers, quants, usually 3 architects. And now with the construction management team coming in, what they'll do is they're looking at every design element. What type of screws do you have? What type of floor do you have? And what we'll have access to is a construction software package. Yep, Procore, and we'll have we'll have that with us for life, kind of. And we'll go, or they are going through this pre-bid process where, for lack of a better term, they're like checking the work of the architects, right? They're taking a look at things, seeing, where we may save. They're taking a look at the data that they have, saying, are these estimates on time? And then as we talk about a recent suit that we settled, we are putting together bid documents that are very specific, very explicit about what we want, right? Which, if you do that the right way, then you can mitigate issues that we had 10 years ago, right? In addition, we have built into the contract a problem-solving procedure, right? So not only is the construction manager there all the time, but there will be engineers there. So if one of the tradespeople on the floor says, you know what, it shouldn't be done this way, it needs to be done this way. I know what the architect said on paper, but this is what it looks like in the field. There is a protocol that goes into place, and there is a final decision maker in that. And that's who you're hiring today, is that construction management firm. And then they will go through this pre-bidding process. They'll put the bidding documents out. This will go to bid, and in early June, late May, we'll be up here, and ICS will take over. And we'll have a lot of people in the room, and we'll open up envelopes, and so it all begins. The total of this contract is around $898,242.
I think there's one other thing as I think about it. This isn't, the construction isn't just one contract to a prime contractor. State law says we being Abington Heights, has to execute a RFP for electrical, an RFP for mechanical, an RFP for construction. 4 different contracts, 4 different contractors that we will have contract with. So now imagine a situation where we're trying to build a middle school. We have 4 different people on site at the same time doing the same thing, and we have to make sure they work together. And not only work together, but well, and get it all together. So they're really there to protect us as much as anything, too.
Right.
But it's 4 different contracts.
Go ahead, Mr. Bell.
And Rod, correct me if I'm wrong, all 3 fees were all roughly
Yeah, they were all very
the
tight.
same thing. They're all.
They're all similar, and I just like the curse saying this. And under budget relative to what we budgeted prior to going to bid, prior to, realizing that we've run into rock and we need more time. But,
Yeah, a couple other things that I'll mention. So once we had decided that we were going to recommend ICS, we did go ahead and call references on ICS. So all three of us called different references. The one reference that I'll bring up is I talked to a business manager at a very large school district that has done a lot of projects, Hazelton, that has done a lot of projects with ICS. And their business manager, as you can imagine, it's a gigantic school district, very polished, experienced person that I was very happy he stayed on the phone with me for about 20 minutes. And, you know, he had two big pieces of advice in addition to recommending them very, very highly. Couldn't speak, you know, more positively about ICS. And I think this is relevant for our process. He said that in his experience, and he's been involved with other projects before, sometimes a construction manager is brought in very, very late in the process, later than we're bringing them in, when you're literally ready to go to bid. And all they do is, what they said is bid and build, right? So they manage the bids and they manage the build. He strongly recommended against just doing that. He actually recommended, and then we asked the finalists this question, and the gist that I got from everybody is that it's about 50-50 when you hire the architect first or the construction manager first. Some people actually hire the construction management first, but a lot of people hire the architect first. He said, whichever one you end up doing, just make sure that you ask the construction manager to do two things. One, give you their cost estimate, because they have more experience in cost estimating than the architecture firms, was the comment that he made. And theirs will be more analytical and not as much estimates. And he thinks, in his experience, and I'm not going to, hope's not a plan. He said that oftentimes he has seen the construction manager come in with a lower estimate than what the architects initially estimated. So we can hope for that. But then the other thing he recommended strongly is have them really look, work together, right? They're not meant to be adversarial, but have them really take a close look at the designs and see if there are either ways that they can save you money through materials, which is not as likely, or if they have different ideas that could save us funds. And as we just heard Dr. Schaefer go through, like when we all got together a year ago and we thought we've been talking for years about how do we generate the cash flow to do these projects, right? And we're making a lot of difficult decisions to do that. And we just found out, from Dr. Schaefer that we're under a lot of pressure that we didn't know about a year ago, that's eaten up a chunk of that cash flow. So as we think about, we have a lot of projects we want to do after this project. We've all talked about it at the other schools. And so anything we can do within reason, we still want to build a state-of-the-art, excellent property at the middle school. But within reason, if we could somehow save money, we should turn over those stones. And he said that they can absolutely help you do that. He said ICS is great at that. So those are two things that I think, and that was a comment he made, whoever we work with, right? Make sure that they try to do that for you. So that's all I have.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yeah, I just want to appreciate the due diligence that this committee did in researching and finding this construction firm. I think it's a tribute to how hard and how strong we're all working to try to save as much as we can, but get accomplished what we need to accomplish. So I appreciate the work that you did in hiring this group.
Thank you.
I'd like to echo that. I think I'd like to thank the Facilities Committee, Dr. Abdallah, Mr. Azar, and his crew. You guys really did do a lot of work, Doctor. And I think also I'd like to thank the administration and the time they spent. I know you had a lot of people involved, and they asked a lot of questions that I think sometimes weren't directly connected to what we're going to build, but oftentimes how the process was going to happen. I think it was very helpful. So thank you very much for a thorough job. Okay, with that, I'd like a roll call, please.
Mr. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Ms. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Ms. Henderson?
Yes.
Ms. Hillebrand?
Yes.
And Ms. Karam?
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0. This time, Mr. Acker asks the board consider a motion to approve the second reading of Policy Series 200.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Ms. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Ms. Henderson? Ms. Hildebrand?
Yes.
Ms. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Moran?
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0. Mr. Acker, ask the board consider a motion to approve the agreements between the Abington Heights School District and the Scranton School District for student 44A and 45A.
So moved.
Second. On the motion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Ms. Henderson?
Yes.
Ms. Hildebrand?
Yes.
Ms. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Okay, next item is the use of facilities report listed for November 2024. And then is there any unfinished business?
Did you
Mrs.
want
Karam.
board reports?
Pardon?
Did you want board reports?
You know, we don't have them today, I should have.
Oh,
I
they
didn't
come
even know
next
that. But we got practice.
Great, never mind.
We're happy to listen if you'd like to.
No, I'll wait till January, what, 20?
Second.
Any new business? Mrs. Tierney?
Old business. What is the date of our retreat and when and where is
I
it?
was going to mention that again. Thank you. As a matter of fact, February 11th. Okay, 9 until 4:30. Dr. Abdallah is working hard to get us a location and get it arranged.
He's got it.
He knows people.
We'll be at Glen Oak.
Yes. So, get it on your calendars, please. Any other new or old business? If not, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Hold on, Ann.